thing that happens. Well, good morning from Huntsville, Alabama. Oh, look, it sounds like I'm working on Audacity now, too.
Maybe.
Which is a little bit of a shock because earlier Audacity had me underwater, literally submerged.
Yeah, Audacity is our audio software that we use for the audio portion of our podcast.
And YouTube Live is what we use for the video without sound portion of our podcast. Sometimes we have sound.
Our issues with sound are legendary.
Yeah, they are.
From software in Audacity that literally at some point just started blocking Bruce's voice. I mean, literally, it would not pick up his voice.
It wouldn't pick up my voice at all. Okay, and I'm like, my voice is not that different from Roger's. I mean, his is booming and deeper and all that.
The radio voice.
The radio.
Of Roger.
Well, yeah, and it sounds more like, what's his name that did the voice of God? Not Morgan Freeman, although he could also pull it off. The other guy.
The voice of God.
Yeah, he did whole big talks. It sounded like what we would consider God's voice. Anyway, good times. So, allergy season is kicking my butt right now.
I am so sorry. My wife Joy is having the same. Although once you start clearing your throat, I'm going to have to start clearing mine.
Well, I just wanted our listeners to know that right now I've got a perpetual, I think they call it post-nasal drip. And that's with me taking Benadryl, allergy meds, all that. It's just like not slowing down. It's been weird because normally my fall allergies are much worse than my spring allergies. But this year, spring allergies through the roof.
So sorry.
And it's not even spring. It's February 15th when this is being shot. So
it doesn't seem to bode well. Wait till the allergy season kicks in, Bruce.
Oh, thank you for that, Raj.
I've just been full of encouragement today.
So speaking of good deals, that's Roger and Bruce, king of the Segway. Speaking of good deals,
Bruce, talk to us about good deals.
I just know you love good deals. All right, so you're a good deal lover.
I love good deals. I'll probably have some good deal to top your good deal.
Well, it's possible. So, Zach and I have been running around on our little side-by-sides, which is basically, if you don't know what a side-by-side is, it's basically an oversized golf cart with a giant motorcycle engine. So it's like super fun. But we've been going to four-wheel drive places and just having a blast. And we use them on the farm. So I've been renting trailers from U-Haul right and left to get it just back and forth to the farm or to take it to Windrock, this four-wheel drive paradise. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm going to have to, because eventually I've got to use it as a garden tractor to redo all of the lawn at Plainview where they tore up every single bit of it to put in a septic system and a French drain and a 500-gallon reservoir tank for groundwater and a sump pump. So the backyard at the Plainview house, it looks like...
Well, there isn't one.
Well, it looks like a nuclear holocaust. It looks like bombs have been dropped, missiles have been going everywhere. It's awful. But I was like, I'm looking for trailers. So I'm looking at trailers, and you look at some of the big box people like Lowe's and Home Depot, you can get a 6x12 trailer from them, but it's going to cost you like $2,500.
The flatbed trailer?
Flatbed trailer with one axle. So those are good for like 3,500 pounds.
Okay.
Which is just barely enough for the trailer and the side-by-side because the trailer weighs about 800 pounds, 800 to 1,000 pounds depending.
Okay.
My side-by-side weighs almost 2,000. So you're right on the edge.
Wow.
So I'm like, I really want a tandem axle. Tandem axle, you can carry 7,000.
Tandem axle. All right. Now we're talking, baby.
Pounds. So, you're looking at those. The cheapest ones I was finding were like an hour away, like in Fort Payne, like $2,500. And then there was like 8% sales tax. And then, if you use a credit card, that's going to be another 3%. I'm like, gosh, we're getting into that 28,000. No, 2,800. So just on a whim, I just looked up some trailer places in Huntsville, found a place, Rocket City Trailer. I said, hey, I'm curious about 6x12.
I think years ago, I think I bought a trailer there. I mean, I'm talking about like 20, 30. Yeah. Well,
they build their own trailers.
Yes.
So they build them on site, and the guy even was telling me when we were hooking it up and everything, basically what they pay someone to do that. It's very little money. But anyway, I got a tandem axle trailer for $2,100.
Wow.
That pulled 7,000 pounds. I was like, they had one left. I said, I'll come get it right now. Literally. I mean, I did it between like counseling appointments. Because I know they go fast, because I just looked at another trailer that was a tandem axle and it was gone before the guy listed it. Literally. Like, this is ridiculous. So I can now pull the trailer, the side-by-side back and forth from the farm to the four-wheel drive places to the Plainview house. Might just park it there for a while.
No, I'm just thinking about all the cascading expenses. You buy a farm.
Awesome.
It's super cool. But then but man, there's a lot of acreage and there's a lot of so we're going to have to get a tractor, and this can't just be it's going to have to be
can't be a little compact tractor, because we have to mow down 12-foot tall trees.
So you buy the tractor.
Got the tractor.
But then
giant bush hog.
Oh, but we're also going to need, the tractor won't do this, so we're going to need this, and then we're the side by side. We need to get around, and now we can use this for some light gardening, but now we got to transport that, so you got to get trailer. Does it feel like it's just never ending?
It feels a little bit like the money pit, but I'll also say it's sort of a fun pit in the sense of I love doing all that kind of work.
Yes.
Gardening stuff. And
you always have.
You can actually buy crazy implements. So this takes me back to the Murfreesboro farm days, where you can put tillers on the back of this thing, cultivators, rakes, plows, push, so basically everything I need to do, I can do at the Plainview house without spending $300 a day or $400 a day on a Bobcat.
Yep.
Running stuff around. I'm like, all right, this is cool. So it's going to work out okay. But all that to say, great deal on the trailer. Very excited about that.
Are you guys thinking about what? You had a
no, you can say so.
Speak, Bruce.
Well, no, I think we can say it now. I haven't said it publicly on the podcast yet. We were sworn to secrecy.
Oh, I think I know, because I was in on the secret.
Okay, so this is a big deal. This is big news in the world of Bruce.
Big news.
I turned 59 like a week and a half ago. But
that's not the big news.
Before I turned 50, no, we're not going to need that. That's But there's also a sonogram. Marlena knew instantly. We are going to be grandparents sometime in August. So
your first grandbaby.
It was due somewhere around August 10th. I'm like, that's going to be a problem. I'm in the high Sierras of California on August 10th. So we need to either push the baby back. Well, push is the wrong word. We need to pull the baby back.
Just push, Carly.
Or we need to push the baby ahead.
Withdraw.
Early August.
Retreat.
Somewhere around Marlena's birthday, August 4th, would be perfect. That would be the perfect time for the baby. So just throwing that out there, Carly. Not that you listen to the podcast, but yes.
It's so tragic.
Huge. Roger's got like 27 kids. This will be my first.
10. It would be the correct number. But
10? That's a lot of grandkids.
It is.
I don't even know how you do you know their names? Like all of them?
I actually do. Yes, know all of their names.
Wow. If I had 10 grandkids, I'd be like, this is why Grandpa Martin called us Elrod and Fester and Lukey. He could not remember our names. There was too many of them. I only had one kid. Dad was an only child.
Yeah.
So with 6 grandkids, he was like, yeah, this is never going to work. I'm going to have to come up with some fun names and just use them interchangeably.
Yeah, I think our oldest grandkid is 13, I think. So, but what a blessing and grace. Yeah.
My youngest grandkid is an embryo. Or slightly larger now. I don't know how big they are at this point. But hey, that's just huge news.
It is.
Huge
I love
news.
it.
Yeah, very exciting. And in other news,
I'm listening.
You can't see, but this is my Trans Catalina Trail shirt and Trans Catalina Trail hat. It says hiked it, liked it. So I got my approval and my campsites permits for the Trans Catalina Trek that we've talked about many times, coming up May 21st through 27th.
Now, Catalina it's an island off the coast of California.
Yep, and it's like a Greek Isle thing. It's just beautiful. It's got these little villages, 2 little villages on the island, and you go from one side to the other, and then kind of loop around back. Just so cool, great, and it's very strenuous. So
So those 2 nights you're camping on the beach, you may be too exhausted to enjoy it.
Well, yeah,
I survived Catalina Island.
Yeah, I got into camp one day at like 3, and it's not getting dark till 6. And someone asked, "What did you do for 3 hours?" I said, "I sat in my chair next to a fire and just recovered." Because yes, the hike itself is crazy, uphill, downhill. Yeah, so I'm excited about that. Good things going on.
Crazy. This just hits my mind, but
why don't you say something?
Somewhat random, yeah, but like crazy sports records that so put this one in. So
into the hopper.
I'm a fan of because we lived in Connecticut for a lot of years, but for 20 more years been a fan of the Yukon Huskies, and their women's basketball team, like 30 years ago, was unheard of, and then they have just
juggernaut. Yeah,
juggernaut. It's hard to. So there are all kinds of things you could mark their how good they are. They've had stretches. I think in like a 98-game win streak, which is a win streak going over like 3 seasons.
Okay.
So obviously you're winning national championships and whatever nuts. But then they had an odd record that was finally ended. So they're down 3 starters. So there's, so they lose to the number 1 team, undefeated South Carolina in basketball. And then the next game they lose, I think it was to Marquette. It was the first time they had lost back-to-back games since 1993. 30
years ago. Wow.
They had not lost back-to-back.
That's hard to imagine.
No, I hate to say it, but
because they play a lot of games.
The Tennessee Vols men's basketball, which is really good this year, just lost 2 games last week. Very, very close. I think they were both on buzzer beater kind of things, whatever. Yeah.
But the Vanderbilt one hurt because Alabama had just beat Vanderbilt by 100 points the week before. No. And of course, Alabama shot to number 1 now.
Right.
Understandably. But yeah, that was, to me, that was not, the Kentucky loss and the Vanderbilt loss were kind of painful.
Yeah. But it just, anyway, just points. So very, very good teams.
Yeah.
30 years without losing back-to-back games.
No, I mean, that's just nuts.
Anyway, I just thought that was.
So any other fun stats post-Super Bowl? Super Bowl over the weekend. Great fun to watch. 2 great quarterbacks, 2 great teams.
Well, I hesitate to say it because
I thought you had a mini stroke
related
for a second
to my morning video, but
Roger does morning videos 5 days a week on Facebook.
So what's fun right now is there are 2 really big greatest of all time conversations going on.
Okay.
So Tom Brady retires, and now there's the conversation around is Tom Brady the greatest of all time?
Seems like a given.
But the other conversation is LeBron James this last week just passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for the most points in NBA history.
Yep.
And so now you're having the GOAT question with LeBron versus Michael Jordan. And it's just a fascinating.
Yeah, that is interesting. To me, it's very similar to the Tiger Woods Jack Nicklaus discussion.
Yes.
Because Tiger Woods has won so many. He's won less majors, like 3 less majors. Right. But I'll be honest, when I look at, because I still think Jack was like the best of all time, but that's probably because I'm old.
We tend to.
But I will say this: it seems to me the competition has gone up radically.
It does
since Jack Nicklaus was playing, because there weren't as many great players.
Right.
Whereas now every week there
weren't as many players.
Right.
Once the pool has increased. So naturally the pool of
Tiger
players
Woods to have won as many tournaments and as many majors as he did in this era is. But see, that's the whole thing of the greatest of all time conversation. There's so many things you have to mix into that. Right. What Michael Jordan did was crazy. How do you define the greatest of all time? How many last second buzzer beating wins do they have?
Right. So is it clutchness? Is it championships?
Is it championships?
Is it
Total points,
pure stats. And that's the fascinating thing. And of course, it's why talk radio and TV and
have so much fun with it.
Have so much fun. But ultimately, when you start talking about greatness in any field, you have a measuring stick. You have a It's what's the tool. Now you might have some bias in there too, because there might just be someone you really like, and so you pick the tool that you pick the measurement that best favors them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's so funny. This is part of what I wanted to talk about today, which is interesting. Because I was thinking of the greatest of all time. Well, when I think of worldwide, of course, I mean, I'm going to pick Jesus. I mean, it's just simple. That's just the greatest of all time. But even this desire for all of us to want to be the greatest at something.
Right.
Now, I mean, we're all wired to want to be great at something. I just think there's this, and I was teaching a bunch of college kids last week. I did a college retreat last weekend, which was a lot of fun because, Roger, now college kids look like elementary school children to me.
Like Patrick Mahomes?
I'm serious. I'm so old now. When I look at them, I'm like, they look 12. And they're college kids.
No, I'm watching the Super Bowl, and Joy's saying, "Is that kid the quarterback?"
Yeah,
Patrick Mahomes.
He's not the water boy.
He still looks like it. Yeah, he's just very boyish.
Just a kid. Well,
kids these days,
and they are kids. But I was talking about the I think it's Romans 12:8 that talks about God has made each of you good at certain things, and I'm like, I just love that. That's a verse because I was pointing out to them, all of us want to be good at something, and here's the great news: you are good at something. I mean, he's made us good at different things. And so part of the joy of life, one of the things I was talking about the whole weekend, I was talking about identity. And I'd read a great quote. I read a great quote
Roger.
by Elmer Fudd, which was that wascally wabbit. No, I'd read a great quote out of something. It wasn't Richard Rohr, but he was quoting someone on one of his weekend meditations. It was so good because it was identity. He said the first part of your life, the greatest part of the first of your life is understanding your container, your identity. This who you are in Christ. He said the second great part of your life is figuring out what to fill it with, the contents, container and contents. And I was talking the whole weekend about our identity in Christ. We're created in the image of God. We're loved unconditionally by God. We're in this intimate communion, fellowship with God. He knows us. It doesn't matter how many people know us out there in the world, how famous we are. We're in relationship with Almighty God, the greatest of all time, knows us. The greatest of all time hangs out with us. But I finish it with God's giving us meaningful, purposeful work to do. And we're good at it. We're good at certain things. So I'm like, so there's a part of wanting to be good at something that's good. That's part of the human thing. I remember the year I gave up basketball, and it was in one of those,
that was a good decision.
It was a good decision, but it was in the driveway at the Shalford house, and we're playing like 3-on-3, and I can do 1-on-1 all day because there's only one decision about who's going to get the ball. Me or the other team,
The game's less complicated.
But when you did 3-on-3, 4-on-4, particularly in a small setting, I get confused. I'm just like, I don't even know. Shirts and skins didn't even help me. I'm like, I don't know.
My team? This would explain how many passes went to the other team.
Well, yeah, or they just took the ball away from me because I would freeze because I'm like, they would just take. But I remember as a kid basketball is not my thing. I remember it. I was walking up toward my Mustang, and I remember, basketball is not my thing. And I realized it goes back to I want to be good at something, and I don't want to do things I'm not good at. I just don't want to do anything because it feels embarrassing. Like in a 3-on-3 where everyone else is good and it's real obvious you're the guy that's behind the curve.
Who's holding everybody back?
Exactly. Who's going to be the last one picked? There's only 5 of us. We need a 6th person. Oh, look, there's Bruce.
We'll go 3-on-2.
Exactly. That's how bad it was. So all that to say, the whole thing of being greatest at something, Jesus said it best. So he defined the greatest of all time in a different way than our culture does. Our culture defined the greatest of all time by succeeding at a specific thing. So that's golf, that's football, that's the CEO of a company, that's whatever. He just said the greatest of all time will be the servant of all. And I was thinking about this yesterday because one of the things I was telling the college students and I tell my clients is when we think of ministry, that word ministry, people think of vocational ministry, a pastor, a worship leader, a missionary.
Yep.
And I'm like, the word minister at a core level just means to serve.
Right.
And I explained to these kids, I'm like, whether you're an engineer or a librarian or a teacher or a youth pastor, you're called to serve every day. You're called to ministry every single day. I said, and really all it is a matter of being aware of that.
Right.
I'm in ministry right now, whatever context, whatever, because even when you look at, because I always go back to Adam and Eve in the garden. And when I say God gave them meaningful work to do, we might look at that and go, that's not particularly meaningful. Tend to the garden.
Right.
Take care of it. And I'm like, but no, that was the great work that he had called Adam and Eve to do. Now he had already put them in charge of all the earth. That's a big deal. And I think that's for all, that's what image bearing meant we bear the likeness of God. We're God's representatives on earth. In the same way that he's in charge of the universe, he's now put human beings in charge of the earth, in charge of the world. But this specific work was tending the garden. And I'm like, isn't that, because we might in our culture go, that's not, okay, you're a gardener, you're a landscaper, not a big deal, but that was this meaningful work that God gave them. So it was just a good reminder for me, and a reminder maybe for all of us, whatever work you do, if you're conscious of it, if you're serving people in any capacity, in some capacity, you're ministering to them. That is ministry.
Well, what hit me, so I was thinking back to this thing, when we use the word great, without even thinking about it, we have an idea in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to name the greatest person, not name Jesus, we're going to name the greatest person, we're going to immediately, there's going to be a tell about this measuring stick we're using. So we may be using...
And Roger, it's inevitably involves, this is one of the big words I used all weekend, comparison. In other words, if I'm going to determine my worth, value, greatness in the world's eyes, it's going to be in comparison to
and
somebody.
And you're going to be more than, your stats are going to be better. You're going to have...
There's going to be metrics that you can qualify.
Right. So if we were just asking that question, we could, maybe a Mother Teresa comes to mind, the Apostle Peter, good gosh, he started the church sort of, or you might look at a Billy Graham or Martin Luther King Jr. We have these names that pop. And here's the thing that hit me. Like, if Jesus were going to name the greatest person who lived outside of himself, this is just Roger thinking. If I look at the measuring tool Jesus we just talked about, it's probably a gal in Iraq somewhere, not in America, marginalized maybe. The bottom line is, it's probably someone we've never heard of.
Right. I say that person's probably defined by the word obscurity.
Right.
Which in American culture, well, and maybe in human culture, is the last thing we want.
Well, and it's certainly the last thing we think about with
greatness. Greatness. Notoriety equals greatness.
Right.
Obscurity equals less value, worthless.
Range of influence. This is where I even... Range of influence, whether we think authors, musicians, teachers, pastors, CEOs, range of influence is so often, and this is what was so significant. When Jesus enters into that question of the greatness, the boys are talking about which of them is the greatest, which again,
multiple times,
including the night before the crucifixion.
Isn't it encouraging, though, that they struggled with that same thing, the whole notoriety thing?
And it's not that. Here's what's interesting. I realized Jesus didn't so much correct wanting to be great. He corrected the measuring tool.
That's Roger's done it again.
No, what I'm saying is
so good.
When you talk about, it's not so much wanting to be great. The problem is you've misdiagnosed greatness.
What greatness is.
So this is what hits me, even for people listening today, is, I mean, how often do we characterize our lives as ordinary? I'm not doing anything because I didn't start an orphanage today. I didn't save someone from drowning. I didn't write a best-selling book. You know what I'm saying?
I didn't start an orphanage today. It's always on the top of mind for me most days
Well,
when I wake up. Well, it's the day today that I'll start an orphanage.
I'm going to build some low-income housing today.
I was thinking today was an orphanage day.
But when you listen to what Jesus is saying, here's what when you're listening, you're here is we can do great things today.
Yeah.
I mean, if you start thinking, because here's the thing, we don't think of greatness as doing the dishes for my spouse,
serving in obscurity,
fixing a neighbor's fence, listening to an anxious friend, praying for a coworker. Mm-hmm. None of those things. We get at the end of a day where we might have done several of those things. We get at the end of the day and think, gee, I didn't do anything. And Jesus would say, what? What yes. Are you?
And when we
you did great things today. You just misdiagnosed great. It's the foolishness. Why we got to be so careful. I'm a nobody. I'm not doing anything.
Yeah, right.
I'm not, there's no, and Jesus could say, someone who gives a cup of cup of water in my name, that's serving in my name, heaven sees that. Heaven sees that. That matters. That's great. So it's reorienting our idea. Like literally today, we can do great things.
Yeah, and we can lay our head on the pillow at night and say, today was a great day.
Was a great day. Yes.
It was a great day because we served. This is interesting. I want to flesh this out a little more. The idea of greatness.
Flush it out.
Not flush it out. That makes me think septic system. Okay, which creates PTSD.
We're not flushing anything.
Not flushing.
We're fleshing stuff.
But when they say flushing something out, that's a weird thing anyway. What does that mean? We're going to take some skin off this one. We're going to flesh it out today.
Yeah, we're gonna scalp some. We're gonna flay some. Whoa, yeah.
Fillet.
Actually, fleshing and flushing are both some troublesome words.
They are. So stop. But this idea of serving in obscurity and the greatness of serving in obscurity. This mirrors the teaching of Jesus when he said, "Don't do your good deeds, good work, to be seen by men." Now, there's another place where he said, "Let your light so shine before men so that they'll see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." It has this idea of where is the glory going in that sense. But this idea of serving in obscurity, in one sense, it only glorifies God because no one else knows.
Yeah.
No one else has any idea. And Jesus would say, so when you give, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. When you pray for someone, go in your closet. Go into a private place versus because I remember when I was a young pastor, if I ever got invited to do a public prayer, I just thought, I am up and coming. I am an up and coming pastor. I've been asked to do the prayer. And now that I'm, older, I'm like, please don't ask me to do the prayer. Okay, I know I'm a pastor, but we get asked to do the prayer all the time. I really would like just someone not a pastor.
This is the special prayer.
Right. It's not
pastors are they have the red phone.
That's what people would actually say. Don't you have the red phone? It's like the bat phone. And I'm like, no, you have the bat phone. We've all all got the bat phone.
I may actually have a poor connection. You might have a better connection.
So several years ago, a book came out, and I just read pieces of it. I didn't get the whole book. I just read like what was on, but it was called Insignificant. And it's sort of the title of the book, and the way the cover was done was like the IN was crossed through. Because this was a person that was serving in a public school in like the Bronx.
Oh, I think I read that. I think I read that book.
Okay. And just felt this sense of overwhelming obscurity.
Yes.
I'm not making a difference. What have I done? What am I, but the beauty of, because again, the metrics are different. It's not, were you successful in making sure everyone in your class got an A? That's not even in your control. You might be the greatest teacher on the planet, and a child's still going to get a D. Right. Maybe an F. But did you pour into those children? Did you invest in them? Did they experience love? Did they experience care?
It's such a great word because, again, we tend to measure greatness by results.
Yes.
what happened.
So scope is one.
So
the second is result.
In other words, so even the sports world, the championships, but we think there are great quarterbacks who never made it to a Super Bowl. And if you're just measuring, it's the problem of just measuring by wins, because wins are the results. You can actually be doing a good job, but because of factors out of your control.
Right.
So it's why even the idea, serving is sharing Jesus with people, but it's not that it's measured by how many people said yes.
Right.
How many people turned, how many people. Jesus simply says, no, just the people who went. It's the people who served. That's so. Even if we think, now listen to this.
I'm listening.
People could say, I haven't been a great parent, because they look at some path their child or one of their kids has taken, and they realize, oh my goodness, I'm not a great parent. No, Jesus isn't even measuring how did you serve? How did you care for your kids? How did you teach? They're human beings with choice. What they do is not the measurement. Stop using your wins, what you see as wins, as the measure for how well you have loved.
Well, and even I was just thinking as you were saying, and I looked it up real quick, even about seconds. It's like, I can often remember Super Bowl winners. A lot of times I can't remember who in essence came in second. I can't remember who they beat. I'm like, who was that? I mean, I know they won, but I can't remember who they beat. So this is just fun.
Yeah.
Because I remember looking up this stat years ago. So Jack Nicklaus won 18 majors. You know how many times he came in second?
Like 34 or something?
Well, 19.
Okay.
So he came in second more times.
Yeah.
But that's crazy.
Right.
So the number of majors realistically could have been in the 30s.
Right.
Which is, again, why I go back to that. In our worldly view of who's the greatest of all time golfer, I'm like, Jack, in my mind, is still. But seconds matter.
Yeah.
And even last place matters. Seconds matter. That's a whole thing. So, Roger, okay, so let's think about the playoffs this year. So, in the playoffs this year, you'll remember his name, but the most insignificant player in the draft is the last person who's drafted. And
Mr. Irrelevant.
He's called Mr. Irrelevant.
Mr. Irrelevant.
Do you remember what Mr. Irrelevant happened to do this year in the playoffs?
Oh, I think I did see, but I don't. Yeah.
Quarterback for like the San Francisco 49ers.
Yes.
Their number one quarterback, Garoppolo, gets injured. And so Mr. Irrelevant comes in and wins a playoff game.
Right.
I'm like, that's nuts.
And in the last playoff game, he gets knocked out in the first quarter. They maybe win. He maybe takes him to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, if he doesn't get knocked out of that game, anyway.
The point being, friends, none of us are irrelevant. None of us are insignificant. Yeah. We have a chance to be great every single day, particularly if we're looking at the metrics that Jesus, because I love what you pointed out. He just changed the measuring stick. He didn't even say greatness is defined by serving. So you can be great every day. Now, it is interesting that he did talk about the worldly metrics. He said the leaders of this age, of this world, lord it over people. It was about power and authority and exercising authority.
Well, I think, and range
superiority, range of influence.
Because it came back to the whole question of the boys wanting the seats on either side of Jesus.
Recognizing he's the greatest of all time.
They're thinking prominence, but if you are...
We can be the second greatest.
Right. We can be on the right hand and left hand of Jesus.
Although the left hand would still be third. In their culture, right hand was bigger.
So they're still looking at range of power, range of influence.
And so in the world of silly questions, who's the greatest? Can you imagine if we had a conversation about the Trinity? The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That would be the most ridiculous, wrong question ever. Who is the greatest? Because that was never in play.
And it's one of the beautiful things about God as God is he's never done that.
Yeah.
It's never which is, Jesus has great joy in submitting. Oh, I didn't do anything without the Father telling me. And then the scripture says the Father has placed everything under the Son's hands.
Yep.
And Jesus will submit to this ministering work of the Spirit.
Yeah.
There's times where he's down and he needs the refreshing of the Spirit to keep him going. And
in John 14 through 17, where I've been stuck, I literally went to chapter 18 today. First time.
Oh, wow.
Like in 6 weeks. But it's this beautiful interchange of Jesus said, and I was teaching that this weekend on the last session, I have brought you glory by completing the work you gave me to do. And I thought, all right, now this is before he went to the cross. So this is, he's preparing for that because he had talked about this great glorification he was about to go through, which was intense suffering. But I was talking to the college kids and I said, you realize for the first 30 years, as best we know, the work that he completed that the Father gave him to do was carpentry. And it was great work. And he was serving other people. It's not like Jesus started serving for the first time when he was 30. Oh, now it's time to serve. Here we go. No, he's serving. Oh, we just don't. He served in obscurity for 30 years. And then, had what we would consider actually a very short time of ministry, maybe 3.5 years of ministry. Of this public ministry, because serving in obscurity, then public ministry. But he said, I've brought glory to you. And then this beautiful thing, he said, now I've given my glory to my disciples, and not only them, but those who will believe in his message. Let them also bring glory to you by completing the work. He said, it brings the Father glory for us to bear much fruit. Mm-hmm. I mean, he wants that for us. He wants our lives to be fruitful. He wants us to be serving. He wants us to experience this greatness, the great work of God that we're all called to, but often in obscurity.
So don't think of fruitfulness as success.
A success or scope.
Right. Success, scope. This is where we think he's calling me to be fruitful.
This is a talk developing.
No, he's calling me to be fruitful. So I'm supposed to make changes happen. Nope. Fruitful is serving. Moreover, it's required in stewards to just be faithful.
Be faithful. And
do today what I've called you to do. Get out of the measuring even what you do today by range of impact, by wins, by success, by someone turning to Jesus, by some monumental kind of thing, and just enjoy.
And to me, and I've talked about this before, but I've been reminded of it because I think I had for a season gotten back to striving, and the striving is often in comparison. It's often in comparison too, because I have thought about reach and scope, and I have thought about success and those things. And more I'm like, nope, I need to get back to serving, because what I find in serving is I find rest. So I can serve and still be at rest. I can't explain that exactly, but if I'm striving, I don't ever find rest.
No.
It's just like, I've got to get more done. I've got to do more. And then I get overwhelmed not by the pressure that God's putting on me to get these things done, literally by the pressure I'm putting on myself.
No, the striving relates to the scope will never be big enough. The results will never be big enough. Fruitfulness will never be satisfied. There's going to be someone else who's, if you're using comparing, that's doing more.
Hey, John, the disciples of Jesus are baptizing more people than we are now. But it was scope and success, all of that at the same time.
By the way, I think this could lead to sort of
a ditty,
a cool ending. No, well, you just quoted John the Baptizer.
Yep.
And I wonder if what you just quoted may be why Jesus said he was great. Because there's a point where Jesus is talking about greatness, and he says, among those born of women, there is none greater than John. And then he wants to say, almost as if to make this point about obscurity, but
he did.
But in the kingdom of heaven, he's the least in the kingdom of heaven. But it's fascinating. When he said that, when does he say this to the crowd? Well, the crowds had stopped going to John the Baptizer quite some time earlier. They were flocking more to Jesus.
Well, he was in prison. Hard to flock.
Well, but prior to that,
yes.
In other words,
they were already making the shift.
They were already making that shift. Then he goes to prison. And remember why Jesus is even talking about John.
Yeah.
John the Baptizer sent messages. He's not even sure Jesus is the Messiah now. He's wrestling.
Right.
And Jesus says the greatest is an imprisoned doubter who lost his crowd.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Here's somebody.
You talk about obscurity.
At this point,
Yeah.
he's forgotten.
Yeah.
He was he's that guy who had his moment. Maybe he had that one big playoff run. The Joe Flacco, he had his, but then, became his normal self later on. But
his golf game came back to him.
But when Jesus points out his greatness, I wonder if part of is he wasn't concerned about greatness.
An imprisoned doubter who had lost his crowd. That's so good. No, it really is. And he was even wondering about probably the scope and success of his life. Have I been turning people to the wrong person? Because, and I've said this many times, because he's like, Jesus announces his messiahship and says, I've come to free the captives. And I just think John the Baptist is like, right here. I probably thought that.
What a great opportunity.
Understandably would think, well, the Messiah is going to free me from this because I've been wrongfully imprisoned. All I did was call out the king for what he was doing wrong. Doesn't go well. But he's a captive. And so Jesus says, blessed on him who doesn't fall away on account of me. And I've always taught it on account of what I don't do.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's so much easier to trust God when he answers every prayer with a resounding yes. Thank you, Lord. On we go. Mm-hmm. But when God says no, man, that takes super faith. That takes the faith that Peter talked about when he said there's a kind of faith that's of greater worth than gold, and it only comes through trial and testing. And I think when God says no, because you'll remember Jesus on the night that he's to be arrested says, Father, let this cup pass from me. And the Father says, no. And Jesus said, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And in that no, and that's there's way too much theology there for me to even unpack.
But I think the idea that whether we turn it into a ditty or not.
He could have called 10,000 angels, but he died alone for you and me. There's a song about obscurity. He could have. Even telling Peter, because Peter, this is what I was reading in John 18. So Peter does what he says he's going to do. He says, I am willing to die for you. I'm willing to lay down my life. I'm willing to bear the sword on your behalf. And if I die, I die. Like he might have been thinking Esther. If I perish, I perish. So he pulls out the sword. He's a fisherman, guys. Okay.
This is not his lane.
Pulls out the sword, starts swinging, hits an ear.
This is heavier than I thought it was.
Yeah. It actually, he doesn't swing. It actually just falls on Malchus's ear.
Oh my gosh.
But Jesus is like, hey, Peter, put your sword down. If I wasn't going to experience this baptism, if I wasn't going to undergo this sanctification, I could call thousands of angels to eliminate that. Yeah. So just put the sword away. But he didn't. He died. He went, in one sense, he died in obscurity, alone, and people spitting on him and mocking him, and yet it was the second greatest moment in history. Because 3 days later there was probably the greatest moment in history. Yeah. So what's our finishing?
Well, I don't know if it's a ditty, but isn't it something like be great by stop trying to be great? I mean, at some level, lose the idea of.
Nope, that's not it, Rob. This is be great by stop trying to be so great. Okay? Just serve in obscurity and you are great. No, it's the whole thing of being fruitful. Jesus said, if you'll remain in me and remain in my love and let my words remain in you, he said, you will be great. Right. You will bear fruit. And it's not, you don't imagine a branch that's trying to squeeze out some fruit. Yeah. We're just going to strive. We're going to just walk with Jesus. Follow him, remain in his love, let his words remain in you, and you will do great things. You just may not, and the world may not understand them as great.
So at any point today where you're serving someone in the name of Jesus, at any point, at the simplest kind of things, literally, the voice of Jesus is ringing, that's great. Listening instead of talking, that's great. Doing something for someone, support greatness is happening all the time, but how often are we getting discouraged? We think our lives are meaningless, or they're or unfruitful, or insignificant, and we want to quit and stop doing. Actually, just don't stop. You're doing great things right now, but where we can stop, because we're not going to be that MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. We're not going to be that Billy Graham. We're not going to be that Mother Teresa.
We're not going to be George Mueller, who did start an orphanage one morning. Just got up and said, "I'm starting an orphanage today."
That one has really thrown you, I can see.
Well, it's just great. I mean, it's just, I'm like, now I'm going to be thinking about it every morning. Oh, yeah, is this the day that I start an orphanage? So
be great today.
Be great today, because you are great as you serve in obscurity. And if you happen to be on a platform, well, sorry. It's going to be a problem. That wasn't helpful. You can be great on a platform, not on a platform. It's just serving.